Hi, this is Alexandra Kitty. Welcome to Clue IQ Chronicles, Crime Code, and Clues. Today I'm going to talk about the first games. It was a three-part series I made called Circle of the Frozen Mind. It was little bit a nod to David Lynch, but also a bigger nod to a true crime story that I wanted to pursue while I was working at A Time to Kill. But for various reasons, it couldn't be done. So the inspiration of this story, as I said, it was part an homage to David Lynch and part fascination with this one crime that happened in Maine a few years ago. Long story short, there were two elderly gentlemen in their 80s, and one lived in Florida, one lived in Maine, and one came to visit his friend in Maine, and they had a falling out. And the Florida man killed the Maine man, made it look like a robbery, and he took off. And the state police had to go look for him. They found him. They convicted him. But it was interesting that he wasn't on the radar right away because people thought, no way can an 80-something man, do that. And of course, age is no barrier. Age is just a number. And we don't really understand people. We make assumptions, mostly unwarranted, and I wanted to look into this. But since this was my first game, I didn't want to do a straight translation from non-fiction to gaming. I wanted to test the waters, and I made it a three-part series, which will become an omnibus with more scenes and choices very shortly. So I decided, okay, I want to do a story on this, but I want to take it from the detective's point of view where he just doesn't see the obvious. So this wasn't so much a whodunit. If you follow the clues, excuse me, long enough, you can see it, who it is. But how the detective understands the scenario is the focal point of this game. So part one simply is an interactive graphic novel. So you're introduced to Detective Tripper. You're introduced to the victim and the crime. So you can go look for clues, understand what's going on, but you kind of understand that Tripper doesn't have a perception which aligns with reality. So the second episode goes with him interrogating people, not seeing the obvious. And the third episode has him completely unraveled and unhinged. And how it resolves depends on which path you take. So here's three key episodes. And the story flow is actually about not getting your man. So I'll flat out say it in the beginning. It might seem like a big reveal, but it's not. How we get there is more important to anything else. So it was very much an avant-garde kind of crime noir, mixing fiction and nonfiction, cinema with storytelling. And so it's basically an unreliable narrator telling the story. And you, as the player, understanding not to depend on his interpretations to guide you. So can you get above his noise? Can you understand why he has these problems in his memory? A lot of things are intimated, not flat out spoken. But if you follow the clues, you can understand why he's lost. So this is a detective in a spiral. Seems like any detective in a crime noir pulp book. And yet, as you go deeper and deeper, you understand there's more to this than convention. So I really wanted to get into this. Why our perceptions don't align with reality. And if you know anything about my previous works and about journalism, that's something I talk about. Truth, perception and the nature of reality. And this was a way I could talk about it, a mystery format, because so many times people will take somebody's unreliable perceptions, their unsubstantiated opinions, and run with it as if this were defect truth, especially if it's told by an authority or a consensus in a mob where nobody questions anything. Well, that's how it is. Somebody says, this is how it is. And people go, yeah, that's how it is. And you go, well, how do you know that's what it is? So I wanted to take this story and explore that. How easily perceptions can be manipulated and how many times perceptions are self-manipulated. We manipulate ourselves to see things a certain way. So we have a crime here that's very interesting, yet it's not as complicated as the detective thinks it is. It's actually very cut and dry. And there are little clues here and there are little clues there. And if you can add it up, you can see exactly where he's gone wrong, exactly who it is. And you can even figure out in the beginning why. So the player can go in going, well, I know the answer, except you have a character who will not do what you want them to because their perceptions go against the obvious. So it wasn't just about the narrative structure that I was interested in doing, it was also the visual and audio design. So creating that atmosphere was a challenge because each part had a different color palette. So in the beginning, it's black and white. As it is a black and white case. There's nothing to question. It's beyond obvious. The killer wasn't that clever, but it's easy to feel clever when you're dealing with somebody who has a circle running in circles because of his own frozen mind. So first is black and white, and then it turns the second part, the palette is blue and black. So things are getting chillier and the detective still can't see anything and he's feeling more and more isolated. And then the third episode is the palette is black and red. So we know that things are getting under pressure. And throughout this story, the symbol is the ouroboros, the serpent that's devouring his own tail. So we can understand why it's a circle of the frozen mind. And the biggest takeaway the detective needs to grasp, and if he can, is that doubt is the first. When we have doubt as the first clue, we can recalibrate our perceptions. We understand the things that we don't know. There's deficits and there's distortions and defects in our thinking. And we start questioning them. We vet, we verify. I worked as a journalist for years, and this is how I always said, my first clue was doubt. What is it that I don't know? Where can I find this? How do I find it? Why is it important? So taking that and translating it into a gaming format, you have to understand colors make a difference. The light, the sound, the mood. The sound effects were important, so I layered very mundane sounds together. So no panel was silent. Everything had its clues, from footsteps to background electrical humming noises. Everything had its place. Crunchy walk on the snow, echoey walk on a cement. So I was constructing the scene. So you can feel it. There were special effects. So you are in his mind and you are outside in his world. And that was a challenge. You're bringing three parts that seem very different into a cohesive story. So each has a slightly different atmosphere that all ties together. So the palette always included black. Sometimes it was white, sometimes it was blue, sometimes it was red. But always the darkness was in there somehow. So after you lay out the visual, the audio, the narrative, you need to think about the key mechanics. So having interactive panels where you can question suspects and look at evidence was important. The clues in themselves were important. You didn't want to put too much, although the crime is obvious in and of itself. That's not where the surprise comes from. The surprise comes from the detective himself. That made replayability possible. So a lot of times the problem with mystery stories or detective stories in video gaming is the replayability factor. Once you know who did it, then there isn't very much more you can do to replay it. This way, there is replayability. How you pursue the case. And you're dealing with a character who's very stubborn in his perceptions. You see it, but the tension comes from not having a character who understands where he should be going. So you're breaking the fourth wall. You're breaking narrative rules when you do this. Usually we have a character we're playing in a game and we have full control. He will do this, he will do that. Well, I was using twine and sugar cubes, so there's, of course, limitations to what you can do. But the basic breaking of the fourth wall was that you know he doesn't have a... And having a detective, you can't switch to another character. You can't override things. And yet there's multiple paths you can still take with an unreliable narrator, with a detective whose heart is in the right place, but his perceptions are constantly off. And when you're off by a grain, you're off by a mile. And I really got to like Detective Tripper. He was very interesting. He wasn't a character I had in the bank somewhere. This was entirely a creation of Circle of the Frozen Mind. You needed a detective that looked like any other detective, nothing in a crime noir story, nothing that seems out of the ordinary, except there is extraordinarily unusual things about him. He can't see he is running in circles because his mind is fixated. So you're challenging biases with this kind of story. You're having the player be able to interpret what the subtext is, what's the meaning, what's the message, what's the moral of the story. You're challenging the detective genre by having a detective who cannot see the obvious. And it's not like a Keystone Cop. It's not like he is a bad person. It's not like he's not a competent person. It's not like he isn't trying his hardest or not finding the clues. His problem is he's decided what the profile of the person is, and then he can't let go. Is it ego? Is it not? Does he actually understand that he's made a mistake? Does he make peace? That depends on the player. The player does have control over his endgame and how he ultimately sees what he's done. So that's all I have to say this week. I hope you enjoy it. If you like what you hear, subscribe, like, share. And next week, we'll be talking about building a style from scratch. So this is Alexandra Kitty. Ta-ta for now.